Hi, I'm Melissa from the Yarn Barn, and today let's talk about bracketing in a threading or treadling sequence. Lots of people I talk to feel relatively comfortable with a basic threading draft like this, with the threading here, the treadling here, and the tie-up box here. But those same people sometimes get a little bit anxious when they see bracketing that looks like this, with all kinds of different marks and numbers and indications. So it doesn't have to be scary. We can talk about it and work through it. Let's start by looking at a large draft, because it's the large ones that typically need bracketing. If you're going to weave a scarf that's 10 inches wide, set at 8 ends per inch, that's only 80 threads. So that doesn't really need to be compressed in any way. But when you have a draft like this, which is a coverlet draft that has over 1,000 ends and more weft picks than that even. So this is more challenging to record or communicate with other people in its current state. So let's look at this, first of all, a little bit more closely, then we'll go to a bracketed version of this that will have the same information but in a more compressed form. So here is an example of a very large draft. It's got 1,074 warp ends, and in the portion that is shown here, it's got 565 weft picks. Now, probably if I were to weave this coverlet, I might make it a little bit longer, but so for right now, this is what we're working with. And so you can see, or maybe you can't see, here's the threading. It's this tiny little line here that's almost invisible. So if you were going to try to write out this entire draft as it is, it would just be a huge thing. You'd have to go back to 1987 and print it out on tractor paper because it's so long. And in fact, so we have to blow it up a ton to even have it be visible. So it's just not practical to use a draft in this form. So there are kind of typical techniques that people use to compress the information that's in a draft like this. And it's based on looking for elements that are repeated. And then basically you tell the weaver, that thing you just did, do that 6 more times or 2 more times or whatever. So if you look at this whole draft, you can see that there are elements that are repeated. So this looks just like this, which looks just like this. So those elements of the warp are being repeated. This looks like this. And then the same thing if you look kind of going down in the treadling sequence. So this looks like this. This looks like this. And then continuing on down. So you don't have to tell them all the details of this time and this time and this time. You can just kind of refer to a group of threads and say, do that multiple times. And then looking down even closer, you can see that this looks like this and this and this and this. So even on a smaller scale, you've got repetition that you can reduce and make more compact. To make this more understandable in a printed form, like in a book or a magazine, where there simply is no room for all of the warp ends and all of the weft picks to be shown. So now that you kind of see what we're looking at, let's look at what the draft could look like if it were compressed. So here it is in its expanded form, and now let's look at a more abbreviated form. So let's start with a simple draft, just to review. So here is a 4 harness draft. Here's the threading portion. This is harness 1, harness 2, harness 3 and harness 4. Here's the tie-up box that tells us what harnesses are connected to which treadles. And this is treadle 1, treadle 2, treadle 3, treadle 4, treadle 5, and treadle 6. And then those same treadle designations continue down. So this is the first pick, and it's on treadle 5. This is the second pick, it's on treadle 6. And with the threading diagram, you can start threading on either side, whichever you feel comfortable with, but just make sure that you orient the draft correctly. If you're going to start threading on the left side of your loom, the left side is if you're weaving, you want to start here. If you are more comfortable threading from the right, this is where you'd start. However, with treadling, you always start at the tie-up box. So this is the first pick, and you work down. If the draft were oriented in a different way with the tie-up box at the bottom, you would start at the tie-up box and work up. But in this one, with the software we're using, we're working downward. So this is a simple draft. Let's look at a draft based on the coverlet pattern that we looked at a few moments ago. So this may look familiar to you. It doesn't look exactly like what you saw on the computer screen because this has been compressed and elements of it have been removed. So, but you can still see kind of echoes of it was like dark, light, dark, dark, light, dark. So you can kind of see the bones of what was happening, but then you see this bracketing, and this is what scares a lot of weavers. But it doesn't have to be scary. It's just a way of communicating that's telling you repeat this, repeat this, repeat this. Let's start by looking at the threading portion. That's up here. Because the drawdown has a lot going on, it's kind of distracting, so I'm going to switch to a version of the draft that doesn't have the drawdown. But this is the same bracketing, just without the drawdown. So again, you can start at the left or the right, just depending on whichever you're comfortable with. I typically start from the right, so we're going to start here. These little lines indicate there's some element that is going to be repeated, these vertical lines. And so when you start from the right, you just dive in and see what is your first thread. And here it's on harness 4. So you're going harness 4, 3, 2, 1. But that entire section is within this bracket. And so that means, because it says times 3, you do that 4 thread sequence 3 times. It doesn't mean you do 4, 4, 4, 3, 3, 3, 2, 2, 2, 1, 1, 1. It means you do 4, 3, 2, 1, 4, 3, 2, 1, 4, 3, 2, 1. And then when you've completed the number of repeats, it says, you move on and you keep going from right to left. And so the next few threads are not under any bracket. And that means you just do them once. So you'll go 4, 3, 2. Then the next thread, number 1, is under all of this bracketing. So this is where people turn pale and have to go lie down with the compress. But you don't have to do that because this is digestible. You just have to break it down. So we look at this first line, and you see it's harness 1, and this sequence, 1, 2, 1, and so forth, stops here. So this portion is a repeat. And because it says here times 5, that means you do this whole portion 5 times. Again, it's running through this 1 time, 2 times, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times. And then this barrier, which has defined this repeat, once you've completed the 5th time, you pass the barrier and go to the next section. This, again, is under a bracket, and it says 4 times. So you'll go through this 4 times. And then you continue. Once you finish the 4th time, you continue beyond the bracket. Now this segment doesn't have anything to indicate that you do it more than once. So this you just do once. But then you hit this bracket. And this bracket tells you that this whole thing that you've just done, going through this 5 times, going through this 4 times, and going through this 1 time, when you look up here, this says do that a second time, do it 2 times. So you do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. Then you've completed all of this bracketing plus this bracketing, and you've done it twice. Now, you're about to pass this bracket line and start a new repeat section, and this one says 5 times. So you do it running through this 5 times. And then in this case, that's the end of the draft and you're done. Let's do the same thing with the treadling sequence, because treadling sequences can be compressed just the way threading drafts can. So in this case, again, we're starting at the tie-up box and we're going to be working down. This very first thread is not under any bracket. It's just by itself. So first thread, you just treadle 3 and throw the pig, or throw the shuttle. But once you've passed that, then you're meeting this first bracket line. And it's saying to do 6, 5, 4, 3, and do that sequence twice. So 6, 5, 4, 3, 6, 5, 4, 3. Then you hit this bracket line, and that's telling you you've got this repeat and then something bigger happening as well. But don't try to visualize all of this stuff happening. Just keep your eyes on what's happening now. So you've passed this line and you do 6, 5, 6, 3, 4, 5, 5, 5, and so on, just within this portion of the bracket. And you do that 4 times. And then once you hit this line, that's the end of that 4th repeat. Then you do this segment, not under any bracket other than the overriding bracket. So this, you just do 1 time. Then you hit this little divider line, and this next segment you do 4 times. So 4, 4, 4, 4, 3, 4, and so forth, and do it 4 times. When you reach the end of that bracketed section, now you're under not another kind of lower level bracket, but only the upper level one. So this, you just do 1 time. Go through this. So just review 4 times, 1 time, 4 times, 1 time, but this number times 2 under this entire section says go through that once and then go through it a second time. When you've completed that second time of going through the full sequence, now you're just doing this part, and it says to do it 4 times, so run through that. This is under no bracketing at all, so you just do it 1 time. And then you come to the end. This little repeat section, 3, 4, 5, 6, you do that twice, and then you're done. So I think the best advice that I have when you're tackling something like this that on first pass looks so complicated is to not try to understand all of it at once. Just start, keep your head down, and kind of nibble at it bit by bit. And if you have to, make little hash marks. For example, times 4 can make little hash marks here as you complete each portion, and that might help keep it kind of visually show you what you've accomplished and how many more you have to do before you move on. And work slowly, and this is very doable. So I hope this has made bracketing more understandable to you. If you have other questions, or other concerns you have about drafts or about weaving in general, just leave your question in the comments and we might be able to tackle it in another video.